When you think of the biggest, baddest mutants around, there's really only one that stands above the rest: Apocalypse. See, even his name sounds scary. And because the character was done dirty in live action, it's about time that mistake was fixed. Now that the X-Men can appear in the MCU, we can all start thinking about the best way to integrate them into the story. And I think one of the best ways is through one of the world's first mutants, aka Apocalypse. With the Eternals movie right around the corner, it actually provides a perfect opportunity to introduce the character. So without further ado, let's get into why Apocalypse can fit into the Eternals right now. Apocalypse didn't always have a name that made small children cry, as he was originally known as En Sabah Nur, and he was born close to 5,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. He was born with gray skin, which immediately made him an outcast. Rather than deal with this anomaly, his village left him to perish under the hot sun. But as you can probably guess, this wasn't the end of the story. A bunch of crazed raiders found the child, and the leader recognized his gray kid's potential. He gave him the name En Sabah Nur and raised him as his own. Talk about a sweet deal. As he grew up, En Sabah Nur's powers started to manifest themselves. He grew in size, strength, durability, and intelligence, and he had serious beef with the current ruler, Pharaoh Rama-Tut. Though any die-hard comic fans know that Rama-Tut was actually the time traveler known as Kang the Conqueror. Kang knew that Apocalypse would grow up to be the most powerful mutant ever, and he traveled back to ancient times in order to manipulate and control him. Things didn't turn out so well for Kang, as his actions basically turned En Sabah Nur into the evil mutant the world would fear. Time travel, am I right? Always a major headache. So remember kids, if you go back in time to stop something, chances are you're gonna cause it. Remember that at all times.
It is possible. We could have caused the very anomaly we've been looking for.
But enough about his backstory. Let's talk about what Apocalypse can actually do. He's a character who has constantly evolved to survive, and over the many years, his powers have just kept increasing and growing. But if we go back to the very beginning, his original powers consisted of being able to control his molecular structure. This means he's immortal, has super strength, super speed, advanced durability. He's also a genius, so don't go challenging the guy to a chess match, you'll probably lose before you begin. And as I profile this guy, it's very intentional that I'm avoiding talking too much about the Apocalypse we saw in X-Men Apocalypse. Let's put it this way. The Apocalypse of the comics is like Captain America, and the Apocalypse of the movies is like Falcon, meaning still likable enough, yet not very important. I kid, I know Falcon has merit, I'm just still upset Cap chose him over Bucky to succeed him in Endgame. Anyway, because the first version of Apocalypse played by Oscar Isaac was so poorly received, the MCU will definitely avoid using the same version of the character as it moves forward. And if we look at the future of the MCU and how mutants are definitely on their way, it's clear that the franchise needs a good entry point to these characters. And actually, Apocalypse is the perfect mutant for the job. It is very possible that we'll be seeing this character in an upcoming movie, and the most likely contender is the Eternals. So why is the Eternals the best option to introduce Apocalypse and jumpstarting the mutants' introduction into the MCU? Well, there are a lot of reasons. For starters, you should know that in the comics, Apocalypse is very connected with Celestials. You remember those guys, right? Of course you do. These beings of immense power have been an important part of the cosmic side of the MCU, even though they haven't been around that much. Mostly, they've been a presence in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, with the first film introducing the Celestials as ancient beings with great power who could handle the Infinity Stones. And if there's anything the MCU has taught us so far, it's that you need to be insanely strong to handle the stones, or else you'll turn into goo quicker than it takes Iron Man to come up with a witty comment.
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
The second Guardians of the Galaxy movie explored the idea of Celestials even further by introducing Ego the Living Planet as both a Celestial and Peter's jerk dad. The most important thing about this movie was how it showed that Celestials have the capacity for great evil. And because the MCU has set the precedent that Celestials can be evil and corruptible, it may not bode well for future Celestials we might see in the franchise. By now you're asking yourself, hey, disembodied voice, what does all this talk about Celestials have to do with Apocalypse? Well, a lot, actually. Yes, Apocalypse was powerful on his own, but what really elevated him to the next level was his encounter with celestial technology. It was a combination that would change the world forever. There's another part to Apocalypse's backstory. While he was still En Sabah Nur, the mutant heard about a ruler who was powered by an alien ship. Nur was, of course, like, bro, that's whack, and immediately went to investigate. What he found would change the course of destiny and set him on the path to be the most feared mutant of all time. Eventually, he found the alien ship and entered it. He didn't quite understand all the language or the technology at first, so he just hang out for a few years on board. How hilarious is that? Let's say you walk into a fast food restaurant and you can't understand the language that's on the menu, but you're impressed by the fancy drink machine the establishment has, and you decide to stay inside for a few years. Yeah, that's basically the same thing. En Sabah Nur built a sphinx around the ship, and that's where he started to hear the voice. Turns out, the ship was a celestial ship, and the voice of the celestial known as Isan the Searcher spoke to En Sabah Nur through telepathy. It was Isan who first bestowed the name of Apocalypse onto the mutant. Isan told him basically he can sit around and do nothing, or he can use the technology on the ship to rule the world. The only tiny thing is that one day, thousands of years later, maybe the Celestials would come back for their payment. Kind of a fair trade, right? Like, if someone said to you, hey, here's all this immense power and do whatever you want with it for thousands of years and maybe one day we'll come back for a favor. Good deal, right? How many of you wouldn't take that? So yeah, the Celestials are an important part of Apocalypse's backstory. A lot of his powers stem from the technology he found on the ship. It made him even stronger than before. Like, sure, he was already immortal, but the advanced tech allows him to enter a coma-like state and heal from any wound. The tech also gave him more powers like teleportation and celestial energy manipulation, which basically means he could shoot energy bolts, causing a lot of devastation and destruction, as well as absorb energy from nearby sources to help power himself. It's basically a really unfair upgrade. Like, Apocalypse was already a menace to society, but the celestial upgrades basically allowed him to become the most feared mutant of all time. It's like if the Hulk was given a strength serum to make him stronger. He didn't need it to begin with, and now he's practically unstoppable. Now let's connect this to the upcoming Eternals movie. We've suspected for a while that the Eternals movie would include more information about the Celestials, but in what capacity? We already know that a Celestial can make for great bad guys thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, so why not continue the trend? We don't know much of the plot of the Eternals movie, or even who the main villains are, but given the nature of who the Eternals are and what they can do, they need to face an amazing threat. So why not let the Celestials play that role? We already know a lot of them aren't around anymore, and maybe it's because the Eternals go to war with them. It would fit with the narrative already given to us in the MCU. Like, how are we so certain that the Celestials are going to be involved? Well, the Eternals movie recently released a logo that had 17 special symbols on it, and it's speculated that these logos each stand for a different Celestial. If that's the case, then the Celestials are going to be very important to the plot of the Eternals movie. We also know that the movie is going to span a huge amount of time. Like, set photos of the movie reveal ancient times, which is an exciting plot development. And if this is truly a story that spans thousands of years, why wouldn't they take some time to explore ancient Egypt? Pyramids, sand, what's not to like? With all these pieces, I already see the story forming in my head. Maybe the Celestials are the villains of the movie, and they want to shape and mold human history to their liking. And of course, the Eternals, who are more thoughtful observers, are against such interference. Their battle lasts thousands of years and sees the Eternals stopping the Celestials from wreaking havoc on all mankind. But some stuff slips through the cracks. What if some of their technology is left behind in ancient Egypt and one powerful gray mutant just happens to stumble on it? Boom! Then the seeds have been planted to introduce the X-Men and the ideas of mutants later on. It provides a great conflict for the movie and sets up Apocalypse's eventual return in modern day. Come on, you just know that would be awesome. It would be a way to excite fans about what's to come to the franchise in a logical and entertaining way. Hey, we're totally open to it if it means this brings us one step closer to watching an awesome mutant versus Avengers fight like Wolverine versus Hulk. Make it happen, Marvel!
I see this as an absolute win.
So I've discussed how Apocalypse can logically fit into the current story in the past thanks to the Eternals, but what about the character's future? Where could the character go after that film? Well, think of him like a ticking time bomb, just waiting in the wings to be a potential problem down the line. Obviously, the X-Men are coming, and when they're fully established in the modern age, they're going to need interesting and engaging villains to fight. Too many times, villains with complex backstories often have their pasts truncated to fit within a 2-hour runtime. There just isn't enough time in one movie to really establish a villain a lot of the time. But by introducing Apocalypse and his backstory in the Eternals, it makes having him as a future villain in any X-Men movie even better. The version of the character we already got in live action was criticized for being paper thin in his characterization. That wouldn't be a problem if the MCU took its time in establishing Apocalypse in the Eternals movie. The MCU once had an important motto: it's all connected. Of course, that motto went out the window as time went on, and it became clear that some MCU projects were more important than others in terms of connecting with the larger MCU films. But now is the time to truly bring that back. To have the Eternals movie continue fleshing out the Celestials and also laying the seeds for a future X-Men movie would go a long way in showing that sort of interconnectivity fans have been clamoring for years. Apocalypse may not be the first choice when you think of ways to bring the idea of mutants into the fold, but the more you think about it, the more you should be able to appreciate that it's the right choice. I would love to see the Celestials influencing history in a way that could help the X-Men show up later. What do you think? Let us know in the comments how you would introduce the X-Men, and be sure to hit that subscribe button for more awesome MCU content. As always, thanks for watching CBR, and we'll see you next time.